When a classified internal federal report was leaked to the public, it detonated like a slow-motion bomb through the American consciousness. The numbers alone were staggering: nearly 2 tons of narcotics intercepted, over 300 firearms recovered, and more than $142 million in cash, gold, and frozen financial assets seized, in a single coordinated operation spanning 7 states. By any measure, it was one of the most significant law enforcement operations in recent American history, but it was not the scale of the seizure that truly shook people. Massive drug busts, however rare, exist within a familiar narrative framework. Americans had seen them before. What shattered something deeper, something structural and psychological, was the revelation of who sat at the center of this criminal empire. Not a street gang, not a cartel lieutenant operating from a jungle compound or a border town, not a shadowy foreign operative, a judge, a sitting state judge in the state of Georgia. A man who had spent the better part of 3 decades presiding over a courtroom, sentencing the very people whose trade he was secretly enabling, and collecting the very awards that recognized him as a pillar of the justice system he was privately gutting from the inside. This is the full story of how that fiction collapsed, and what it revealed about the fragility of the institutions we trust most. Chapter 1. Before dawn in Cobb County. The morning of the raid arrived quietly, as consequential mornings often do. At precisely 5:42 a.m., the residential streets of Cobb County, Georgia were still wrapped in the particular stillness of early autumn. A coolness in the air, a thin mist clinging to the pavement, the kind of morning where the world seems to hold its breath. Neighbors were asleep. Porch lights flickered in the fog, a single dog barked somewhere down the block, then went quiet. 5 armored SUVs, all stripped of license plates, rolled slowly to a stop in front of a large suburban home at 1-00764. The vehicles moved without urgency and without sirens. There was no announcement, no loudspeaker command, no theatrical display of force. The agents who stepped out moved with the deliberate economy of people who had rehearsed this scenario exhaustively and intended to leave no room for deviation. They wore black body armor. Their faces were obscured. Green laser beams swept methodically across the windows of the house, checking for heat signatures, mapping what lay inside. "Stack ready," came the command, clipped and colorless. Then the hydraulic ram connected with the reinforced steel front door. The sound was enormous, a percussive crash that rattled the frames of pictures on interior walls and sent vibrations rippling through the floorboards. Inside the home, a faint light glowed from an upstairs bedroom window. The clock on the nightstand, investigators would later note, read 5:43. The entry team moved in triangular formation through the darkened hallways, each step placed with surgical precision to avoid disturbing potential evidence. In the kitchen, a coffee maker sat half full and still warm. In the living room, a framed portrait of Hale standing before an American flag in his judicial robes had fallen face down onto the hardwood floor. The glass had cracked cleanly down the center. One of the agents would later describe that image, the shattered portrait, as the moment the investigation became viscerally real. A thermal imaging camera mounted on one of the entry team's helmets detected an anomaly almost immediately: a cold seam behind the living room bookshelf, the telltale signature of a concealed cavity. When agents broke through the false wall, what they found removed any remaining uncertainty about what kind of man Marcus Hale truly was. Stacked floor to nearly ceiling, sealed in heavy plastic stamped with Cartel insignia, were tightly compressed blocks of heroin, approximately 20 pounds in total. Beside them sat bundled stacks of currency, brand new $100 bills still arranged in sequential serial order, totaling $2.4 million. And in the basement, behind a biometric steel vault, lay a tactical weapons locker containing an extensive collection of rifles and handguns. The serial numbers on nearly every firearm had been methodically ground away. But it was what agents found on Hale's cell phone, still unlocked, still displaying its screen, that elevated the case from significant to historic. The phone contained a series of encrypted text exchanges with a man known to international law enforcement as Tandagua, a Venezuelan cartel leader who had appeared on Interpol's most wanted list and was considered one of the most sophisticated narcotics trafficking architects operating in the Western Hemisphere. The messages were operational in nature: shipment weight, corridor timing, scheduling around port arrivals, and, most damning of all, references to court rulings being timed to coincide with the movement of cargo. One decrypted message read simply, "Run 38 loads this quarter." Same route, no roadside interference. If that figure was accurate, it represented roughly 1 ton of heroin and fentanyl moving through the southeastern United States in a single 3-month window, unimpeded, undetected, and cleared by a man who was simultaneously being paid by the state of Georgia to uphold its laws. An investigator, speaking quietly into a recording device during the initial sweep of the property,